Hey friend, listen. I know the world is scary right now. Corruption, war, inflation, demographics, degeneracy, disease, unrest, hatred, and despair. We didn't come here to tell you how it is, but that it's going to get way better.
Got a good thing coming, and it's all I need. Everything I wanted, just wait and see.
Better by Bitcoin.
Good.
Always love it. Always love it.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. All right. We are Better by Bitcoin today. On the pod, we got myself, Bondor, Cypher, or Bondor, Gilded Plebe. We have Anton, we have JD, and we have Corey. Welcome to the pod, everybody. Today, we wanted to talk about Charlie Kirk directly. Now that we have a lot more information about what happened, what his impact was, who he was, and just some of us on this call, myself included, didn't really even know anything about the guy. But yeah, we want to just dive in and figure out Charlie Kirk, his legacy, what he did, where he got some stuff right, where he got some stuff wrong, and really just look at his impact and the rest of it. So starting off, I kind of want to just get an intro for everybody with regard to who, like in their mind before Charlie Kirk was assassinated, who was Charlie Kirk? What was your interactions with him, if you had any, or relationship to him, if you had that? What, how, or nothing. So I could start just to get the ball rolling because it's easy. I hardly even knew who the person was. I had no idea who Charlie Kirk was. I first heard about Charlie Kirk via my dad, maybe 4 years ago or so. We were talking about Bitcoin stuff, and I asked my dad, like, what's something that gives you like non-existential hope about the future, about America, about going forward in civilization? And he was like, Charlie Kirk. So it's like, that's the first time I even heard the guy's name. So I didn't follow him, whatever. I'm more of a Bitcoin guy, obviously. So I was like, okay, well, never heard of the guy. I don't know what his stances are on all this other stuff, but for me personally, I super discounted it. So yeah, Anton, what about you?
I was just looking up. I was going to go on Grok and look up Charlie Kirk quotes about Bitcoin. So if any of you guys want to do that, I knew Charlie Kirk. I met him in, I can't remember if it was 2017 or 2018. Nobody knows who I am, but I'm a filmmaker and I'm a director of photography. I did a movie called No Safe Spaces. That movie starred Adam Carolla and Dennis Prager, and we crowdfunded it. It took almost 3 years to make the movie, went into theaters, was actually pretty successful. And Dennis Prager is this conservative educator, founded PragerU. Adam Carolla is a comedian. I don't know what he is politically. He's best friends with Jimmy Kimmel, but tends to have a more conservative, libertarian kind of get off my lawn attitude. So the movie's great. If you've never seen No Safe Spaces, find it. Maybe there's a bootleg copy of it on YouTube. I have no idea, but you can find it. Good movie. So at some point we went to Berkeley, went to Cal up in Berkeley. And if you can believe this, because it's the most liberal progressive campus in America, basically, they were having an event. And at the time, Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens were best friends and they shared the stage together. I might be mixing these up because we went to 2 or 3 of these events. And I sort of knew who Charlie Kirk was. I walked into a room. He was, I think, with Candace, who most people didn't know who Candace Owens was at the time. The second I walked in the room, Charlie Kirk ran up to me, shook my hand, and said, "Thank you for being here." And then he said to her, "These are friends." And then, so that's how I met him. Very gregarious, very charismatic guy. He's also who I coined the term boomer whisperer that was based on Charlie Kirk, because Charlie Kirk, people who were like 70 years old at the time. Charlie Kirk was the ideal person of our generation who they wanted us to be. He could walk up to any rich boomer, ask them for money, and they would just cut him a check. It's an incredible power. And so anyways, we traveled all over the country. Essentially, we went to UCLA, and we would just, set up on a college campus, no security, no formal setup, just walk onto a college campus and just start asking students about ideas. And he was an incredible debater. So anyway, I've said a lot, but I knew him, great guy, and it's just an incredible loss that we lost him. And he also, in my opinion, was a Bitcoiner. He used the word crypto a lot, but he was basically there. So that also, he's a loss for Bitcoiners. What do you guys think?
Indeed. Yeah. JD, what is your connection? And you don't have to talk about just specifically before, because I know that you also went to Arizona, Glendale for the memorial. But yeah, if you want to jump in, JD, and see what you got, what your connections were.
Yeah, I knew of Charlie. I have a family member who's a pretty big conservative YouTuber. And so there's a lot of kind of like understanding in my mind of like what the kind of like what that world is, not by any sense the same degree as like Anton, who like fully gets it because he's ingrained in it. But I just kind of had like a little bit of an understanding of some of that YouTube world and like how small it is too. Like the family member of mine who is in that YouTube world like knows everybody. So I'm pretty confident they'd met Charlie at some point in time or debated him. I can't remember. Definitely know that there was some interaction, but the key for me was I didn't really know much about Charlie personally, because I was like, I'd seen his videos and my wife would send them to me all the time. And I'm also from Chicago originally. And so it was really interesting. Like I didn't realize that he was from Chicago until kind of after the assassination. And then if you really kind of dive into like some of the biggest change agents of the current kind of, I'll call it like influencer world, like a lot of them are from Chicago, like Tim Pool from Chicago, Charlie Kirk from Chicago, the family member of mine from Chicago. And so it's a very interesting thing to kind of like see a lot of the Midwest mindset permeating the current worldview. And Charlie actually embodied that perfectly. Like what Anthony was saying about him being able to like be the boomer whisperer. Like I've always told people the story about what I think. If people ask me about New York and LA and then the Midwest, like how would you describe them? And I literally had gotten on an airplane and I was trying to tell somebody who'd never been to Chicago before. So I was in LA and like, hey, I've never been to Chicago. Like, what's it like? I was like, well, if you go to New York and you bump into somebody, they're going to tell you to go fuck yourself. If you go to LA and you bump into somebody, they're just going to kind of look at you, but it's going to be like that GFY look. And if you go to Chicago, somebody can tell you to go fuck yourself, and then they're going to help you with your bag. And sure enough, we land, and the woman in front of us is trying to get her bag down, and she like her hand slips off and like hits this guy in the face. She's like, "What the fuck? Let me help you with that." And it was literally like the embodiment of the Midwest mindset, which is like, "Hey, we have stuff to do, but we're all in this together." And it's a really interesting mindset because in New York, they don't care. In LA, they don't care. They're in their own kind of like little box. But Charlie embodied what kind of the Midwest mindset is like, hey, we have like 8 months of suck. Like it snows, it's cold, summers are fantastic for like a week. And then outside of that, like it's just kind of muggy and not great, but we just have a good time and we have a beer and do all that stuff. And I think that's one of the things that watching now so much Charlie content post assassination that I didn't even really know. Like I just watched last night his interview with Dave Rubin, and I think there's a really interesting aspect of Christ, I would say, that Charlie kind of embodied, that after like post assassination, like, man, like Charlie makes me and made me want to be a better husband, Christian, friend, person. And I can get into this later when I talk about actually going to the memorial, but somebody said it that was, I think it might have been Benny Johnson, but somebody was talking about how at the memorial, every single person, including the president of the United States, who got up there to talk about Charlie, made it sound like Charlie was their best friend. And I don't say that to be like they're just like trying to, but like Charlie had that effect of like Charlie was literally every single person's best friend, which goes to your story, Anton, of like immediately warm and gregarious and welcoming you in. And I think that was such a unique trait because that's not normal. Most people are like, oh no, like I'm gonna do my thing. How can you help me? And Charlie was like, I'm gonna do my thing, which is I love you and how can I help you? And that's such a different mindset. And it's really, really sad that that was kind of taken from us. But it's also very, very telling that, and I'm going to use the left, like we try to not be super political, but at the end of the day, like I'm currently personally a crypto anarchist. So like left and right are totally different to me, but that's a totally different topic. But the moral of the story is the United States is left and right. That's kind of the way our current culture works. And the current progressivism, which I wouldn't call liberalism because classical liberalism is totally different than progressivism, but current progressive culture was so afraid of this guy that they had to take him out. And so it's really, really tragedy. It's really, really unfortunate.
Yep. Corey, you're up.
Yeah, I wasn't terribly familiar with Charlie before this, beyond seeing some of his videos. But what I ran into a couple of years ago, online, and I never met him, but he struck me as a Steven Crowder type. He was the guy who did the Change My Mind table, right? And when I first saw him, I thought, oh, there's another guy doing the Steven Crowder thing. And I was never a huge fan of Steven Crowder. I respect his boldness and his honesty. This is certainly more than I'm doing in that arena. So it's not to denigrate him, but Steven Crowder's approach was to say something controversial in a place where he knows it's going to be controversial and study it like crazy, have all the stats and statistics memorized, and then get people who have an emotional response to what he said to debate with him. And it immediately set up this power dynamic where he was in control. And the person who was arguing with him was going to sound shrill and emotional. And so it felt straw man-y to me. And so I didn't know how much actual effect that was having, if anyone was actually changing their mind because of that. And over time, I came to realize Charlie was doing everything that he could to help the person make the best point that they were trying to make. He was steel manning for the person. If they got flustered, he told them to calm, to be calm and to help them make their point as best as they could. He wasn't in any way trying to get them to sound emotional or to sound shrill and to communicate his point clearly. And that I thought really actually did advance the debate between the two sides and between people who are fundamentally opposed on basic truths. And this goes back to an episode that we had a week or two ago, where we talked about saying simple truths calmly is the most powerful asymmetrical trade we can make against tyranny. Saying things out loud that people have either learned to forget or been conditioned to forget, or they're conditioned to want to believe something differently, and over time they start to believe something differently. And if you say something simple out loud, like a fatherless home is a bad thing for a family and for a child, right? You can just say that out loud. And he would say things like that, and he would let whatever response to that there was, he would just let that happen and let that be seen. And he didn't need to convince the other person that he was right. He just needed both points to be set how they, in their best form. And it showed a real commitment. And this is the Christ-like thing for me. It showed such a commitment to truth being the only victory. And not that he had a sole cornerstone of truth, that he was 100% true all the time, but that if you just say it, I think he would have loved on a number of these points for someone to make a really compelling argument that really made him change his assumptions. And I think you saw that over a number of years, that he did actually learn from the people he was talking to. He was malleable. Those are the things that I've come to really respect, beyond just the boldness of going into environments that he knew were going to be generally pretty hostile. And that's why it felt like such a loss. It felt, unfortunately, kind of appropriate, which is a horrible way to describe the assassination, but it felt like this is the natural course in this environment of saying things like this out loud. I found myself after the tragedy saying, I wish I was more surprised that this happened, but I'm not that surprised that this happened. And that's really crushing. that's a wide open question. I don't know what you do with that. I don't know where you go from there. I will say, in the wake of Jimmy Kimmel getting fired or suspended and then coming back and thanking Ted Cruz and Candace Owens for defending his right to free speech, that was a level of humility. I didn't love everything Jimmy Kimmel said, but I really did appreciate that. It was something that I hadn't heard from a person like that in a very, very long time, and vice versa, right? I'm not the biggest Ted Cruz fan or Candace Owens fan. And when a principle was actually transgressed, they actually stood on the principle. And that's, I think, the overarching point that I want to make as I dwell on this is that's what I really want. Like, obviously the tragedy was a tragedy and we call it a tragedy. But then I also got sad by the response on the right that just took the weapons that we've been criticizing for a decade and said, well, now it's our turn, let's use them. And that to me has no honor in it. It has no commitment to principle in it. It's decidedly not what Charlie Kirk would have done, right? He was a man of honor and principle. And if something transgressed his principles and it was on the right, he would criticize it as quickly as he criticized something on the left that transgressed his principles. So if there's any hope I can take from it, it would be that people start looking for the people that are actually holding to principle and not to kind of their basest, lowest common denominator party lines on either side. I don't know if that's resonant with anybody, but I hope I didn't gloss over the actual fact that the tragedy is a horrible tragedy. It's just how I've been processing it.
Yeah, I'd love to say one thing before you jump back in, Bondor, but I think the commitment to truth is 100% Charlie's greatest attribute because he embodied that to a degree that I don't think I've seen anywhere else like that. I'm a little I disagree a little bit about the right using the tactic of the left, only insofar as that, like, I was super happy to see that. I was super happy to see the cancel culture shoe on the other foot for a couple of reasons. One, it was really, really hard to explain to somebody cancel culture on the left because they didn't get it. Like, cognitively, like the cognitive dissonance was so heavy because they were just on this moral high ground of like, no, you should be fired for whatever it was. And so I'm actually very happy that the Jimmy Kimmel thing happened. I don't necessarily know about the resolution, like the Sinclair stuff. Like, Sinclair can do whatever they want, right? They're a business. And Jimmy Kimmel's ratings arguably are not as good as literally anybody else on YouTube. Like, verifiably, because they're using Nielsen ratings. 129,000 is based on 40,000 homes. Like, the numbers are actually not great at all. That's besides the point. Where I'm going with this is I'm very glad the right was able to kind of use the cajole against the left. So now everybody can kind of go back like, that was a bad idea for anyone. Like, the left shouldn't do this, the right shouldn't do this. And I totally agree with that. Like, you shouldn't be punished for that. But I do think it was kind of one of those things of like, hey, if you get hit with a stick enough, you can turn around and hit the person with a stick, and then both of you can go like, this was a bad idea. And so I hope that that's where we end up, is like cancel culture is just kind of like rooted out because it is stupid, bar none. But I do think, by the same token of some of the stuff we're seeing with the Tylenol nonsense right now, of just like literally like, guys, like, everything is dumb, but like, people should legit like take a breath and realize it's like, okay, there are good points on the left, there are good points on the right. What is the truth? Like, I think that's the key here, is like, it doesn't matter what political points you're scoring. All that matters is the truth. And like, that I think is the thing that kind of comes to the surface the most for me on that. So sorry to interject that bonus.
No, I appreciate it. I think it was laid bare kind of when a private employer doesn't want to employ someone who celebrates an assassination. I don't think that's cancel culture. I think that's just run-of-the-mill consequence of your actions, right? I think there are limits. There are limits for what a private company is going to want to see their employees say, right? There's a baseline morality that they want from
You're representative of that company, right? Dave Ramsey says it the best. Like, Dave Ramsey at one point in time went to one of conferences and he said, before they hire somebody, they'll go and they'll do, like, an executive, they'll go and do a dinner with their wife, with their spouse. And the spouse of this particular person was just like, kind of had vitriol against Dave. And he's like, if I'm signing your paycheck, I'm not giving any money to that person. And so it was one of those things of like, he's like, you're a representative of me. And so if your wife is going to be bad mouthing me at my own dinner table, no. And so, yeah, I totally agree. Like, you're representative of the company, including the family. And so, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think the thing that I hope happens is when we were many people on the right and left were railing against Biden's lawfare against Trump and the underhanded ways that they were trying to get him eliminated from the race, which have now been proven completely true. There's been more revelations about the way that they were leveraging Google and YouTube, shadow banning people they disagreed with so that there'd be a more consistent propaganda message during COVID. Those are all like documented things now. And I think people on the right and left were right to rail against that. And when I see, a leverage against the FCC to eliminate free speech, I feel the exact same thing. There's absolutely no difference to me there. And that's what I want to see more of. And I think there's a silent majority in the middle that's getting a lot less silent. And I think that is net a really good thing, right? When they see the capture of the most extreme parts of the 10%, 20% of each side, just kind of utilizing authority to the maximum of its ability. That should make everyone a little nervous. And I hope that that's a good outcome that comes of this.
I think it's also good that this is kind of what Charlie was about, getting to the truth, right? Like you can't have a cancel culture and also get to the truth, because if you're shutting down the voices that are speaking the truth, you're not getting to the truth. I kind of want to ask, I kind of want to ask about the assassination itself, and not necessarily the technical details, but more along the lines of how did it affect you? What were you doing when it happened? What was, because it very much feels, and I've seen this conversation play out a handful of times now, which is this exact question. What were you doing when you found out? And we haven't really seen that question since, for me, the biggest, that question is usually always in relation to 9/11. And it's almost not in relation to anything else. No one really cares what you were doing when you first found out about COVID. It was like, that just kind of rolled out slowly, right? This is a very stop in your tracks, and you know what was happening. You remember it. So I
was in jury
for anybody
duty
who wants to speak,
for COVID. I was literally sitting in jury duty when the country shut down, and they came out and like, you can all go. You need to go home. I was like, oh, that's a specific one to remember. But I'm with you. It was one of those unique events. Yeah.
So if anybody has, how did the assassination, the actual news of it, the videos of it, how did that affect you? What was, I don't want to put anybody in a spot because that's a pretty personal question, but yeah, if anybody wants to speak about that.
So I was on my way. I was driving to the Reagan Library, and I had a production with Ben Shapiro, who was a friend of Charlie Kirk's and a guy who was a producer on one of the Matt Walsh movies that I did, called me and said that Charlie Kirk had just been shot. So I was driving on the freeway, but I did kind of like pull up X for a second and immediately see the shot, and in the wide shot, which was so graphic. And God bless Elon Musk for having X. I don't love that everybody had to see something so traumatic, but if X didn't exist, I'm not sure that seeing that graphic imagery would exist so quickly. So I saw it and then got to I want to say the shoot, but I got to the production and immediately was told that it was canceled and that Ben Shapiro wasn't even going to show up. And then, so we went into the Reagan Library, and there were many people there who were friends of his. So people were sobbing, and actually one woman led us all in prayer for him in the middle of the Reagan Library. And then we did a very awkward tour of the Reagan Library because we were inside, but we didn't know that he had died yet, because he hadn't died. He went to the hospital. So it was actually looking kind of hopeful at the moment. But then as I'm sitting there, I'm below the big Air Force One, and I pull out X and I see again, but this time it is a 4K close-up of the shot. And the second that I saw that, I was like, oh, and I knew. I'm like, that was a kill shot, 100%. So that's how I found out.
Was the Ben Shapiro cancellation because they were worried it was going to be a coordinated attack on conservative influencers?
I don't know. I don't think so. It wasn't an event that he was speaking at. He was actually interviewing a family whose son had some sort of genetic condition that, I don't know. They were trying to, I don't know, get U.S. healthcare to pay for. I'm not even sure what the thing they were talking about. He just was distraught and needed to sort of regroup and figure out what he was going to say about it, I think.
Yep, that makes sense.
I I don't even remember what I was doing, but I was we might have even, I think we had a show that day. I think we did a show, and I just remember opening X, and I get served Charlie videos every so often. And it's like, oh, it's a Charlie Kirk video, and it was a longer cut of the kill shot. And the first thought that I had, I was like, oh, that's weird. There's no subtitles. And then I see him get shot. I was like, what just happened? And I had the exact same thought you did, Anton, is, I hunt and I like to go shooting and stuff like that. And instantaneous, I was like, that's it. I was like, there's no question in my mind that he was gone instantaneously, which we have now confirmed. But I was just sitting here and I was like, dude, I don't even know what to think right now. And it was the next day, because I was, I think, Tuesday, there was a like a men, oh no, it was that night. There was a men's group at my church, and we talked about it, and it was even just that day, because we'd found out, later that day that it was confirmed he was dead, that there are Gen Z guys at this men's group, and they're talking about where they were. And it was interesting because it's like, that was the same thing that I remember experiencing during 9/11. Like this is this generation's 9/11. This is the first, like, COVID was kind of like a thing that it was a shared experience, but this was a moment. Like, this was a moment because with 9/11, it kind of like congealed the entire country around this like patriotism idea. But I really am hoping that this will congeal the country around this truth idea, because that, I think, is the biggest thing that I've been seeing. Is like, I have a lot of people that I know on the left who have said, I'm done with progressivism. Like, if we can't literally have a dialogue with somebody, we have to kill them. That's not who I am. Like, I'm not a violent person. And so it's really interesting to me that, I had my moment of, I was sitting here kind of working, but then later that day, people were talking about where they were when they heard. And the question was like, where were you when you found out? That was the question, asked by a Gen Z to another Gen Z. And I was like, this literally feels like 9/11. Because I remember for 9/11, I was sitting in class, listening to the radio, Spanish class, and my Spanish teacher had family that worked in the towers. And so it was like one of those things of like, what is going on right now? So.
Yeah, all due respect to the comparison, I think the loss of life in 9/11 needs to be considered quite a bit more of a tragedy. I understand what you're saying with the solidarity that I think a lot of America felt around that, and unifyingly, rejecting political assassination. It's different in multiple ways, but the fact that it wasn't a foreign entity, it wasn't a foreign adversary, I think caused this one to be more soul searching, I think, than 9/11, because 9/11, it was so much easier to whip up a frenzy of patriotism. I felt it. Everyone felt it, right? There's this entity out there that hates us so much that they want to crash our economy and kill thousands of our people. And that's all they think about and want to do all the time. They planned it, they premeditated it. And with this one, there were a depressing number of people celebrating, but in the grand scheme of things, not that many people were celebrating, right? And they got blasted out everywhere, kind of the worst of the worst of overly online people that don't really understand that there's consequences to their actions. And I don't shed a tear for any of them that got fired. I was on a plane flying from Boulder to Alaska for a shoot in both locations, for a documentary shoot. So I heard about it through the text thread with you guys, because I didn't have any internet, so I couldn't follow any news. I wasn't getting any updates. And I asked, like, if I was on Twitter, like, what would I know right now? Like, what's the news saying right now? And I think it was Bonder was just like, we don't really know anything other than he was shot. So then I'm just sitting there on a plane waiting for the text thread to update to see if anything happened, which is an awful, awful place to be. And then afterwards, just talking with the team, like, did you guys see what happened? And immediately it was like, did you see what happened? Did you see what happened? Everyone knew we were talking about the same thing immediately, right? And that's that kind of unifying, terrible thing that just has that effect. And I was kind of in a daze, honestly, because there was just so much to unpack, right? There's the immediate, like, who did it? Why was it organized? Was it one rogue person? And what kind of support did the person have? Is there more coming? All those sorts of questions that fly out when something that chaotic happens. It's that Joker line that everyone freaks out when it's not part of the plan, right? When a truckload of soldiers dies, no one bats an eyelash, but I threaten to kill one mayor and everyone loses their minds. It's because it's not part of the plan. And this is a not part of the plan event, right? It's an extreme violence that's not part of the plan. And this is a horrible thing to say, but there's a reality where mass shootings, random mass shootings, feel more like part of the plan of America for the past 15 years, right? Since Columbine, when the entire country melted down when Columbine happened, when with good reason. And now we're like, oh, there was another one, right? But this, like, if you look up political assassinations of pundits in America, there aren't any, right? This is singular, right? The only real political violence that we see is assassination attempts or successful assassinations on actual leaders, right? Like, even when Trump got shot at, it wasn't nearly as unifying as this, because it makes sense, right? That's something that's happened as long as we have recorded history. There have been plots and assassination attempts on political leaders. On political pundits in America, that's a new thing. That, to me, is what jumped the shark, and I think has people self-searching in a much different and more profound way than anything I've seen before.
Yeah. For me, I found out about it on a call with Jordan. Jordan Bush actually told me while we were on the call. The call went from being a productive call to a very quiet and unproductive call. For me personally, I was trying to figure out who Charlie Kirk was. So for me, there was no real shock. It was like, yeah, that's awful. It's crazy that somebody got assassinated. But who was the guy? Like, what was the impact? What was the actual thing? And as the hours tick by, you start to see, you start to see the videos of him on campus. You start to see the interactions he's had. You start to see the declarations of faith that he made in front of huge amounts of people. And all of my image of Charlie Kirk in my head was essentially nil on his day of assassination. And his image went from nil to larger than life, like bigger than anybody in America, right? Bigger than Trump, way bigger than Trump. And he did that in 24 hours, maybe. It's just wild amounts of influence just came to the surface, right? Just crazy. On that note, like, what is his legacy? Like, what was his influence? Like, going forward, how are people going to be looking back? Like, for you personally, what is what's the impact that, I mean, JD, you mentioned a little bit earlier, it makes you want to be a better Christian, a better husband, a better dad. But yeah, what's his legacy? What's Charlie Kirk's legacy? What do you think?
Yeah, I would say it was really interesting to me that I had just been dwelling on this point that I brought to the podcast of saying simple truths out loud is the asymmetrical trait against tyranny. And I was thinking in my own life, can I do that just a little bit louder than I was doing it? And then I saw this, and then, Charlie Kirk gets assassinated. I'm like, I could do it a lot more than I'm doing it right now. Why am I looking at stepwise changes toward that? Why am I thinking about, like, how do I make a 2% improvement on this? This guy was, is incredibly bold to say the things that he was saying in front of the crowds that he was saying them. That's the legacy for me. I don't have to ramble on about that. I just think it's incredibly bold, and I think it might be one of the only charges as a Christian, right? In terms of, like, you care for the poor, you use your power and influence for the sake of people that don't have it, to the elevation of the people that don't have it. And you have a commitment to truth and hope. We're not under authority to lose hope. We're not under authority to change the truth for our own benefit. Those are really simple things that if you just do them at, at full volume, are going to make waves no matter what.
The biggest takeaway for me is I knew Charlie, and I knew him as a master debater. If you've seen the South Park, and a great political commentator on the conservative right wing tip. What I didn't know about him was that he was a great evangelist. He was incredible at actually sharing the gospel, really telling the story of the gospel and inviting people to accept Jesus for salvation. And I think the reason I didn't know him that way is because he often presented the gospel, but it was in the midst of a 2-hour debate, and it kind of got lost in the debate. The thing about Charlie getting assassinated is that he got the craziest signal boost that he could have gotten, one that he never would have gotten in life, where people who never would have wanted to listen to him want to figure out who he was. And so now you have these clips, and just like we've seen with our own podcast, the success of the YouTube shorts are what get us subscribers. And, it's a bite-sized piece of the most poignant thing that we said in an hour-long podcast. In that same way, I have probably 10 times now seen Charlie present the gospel, seen that clip get clipified somehow, and that thing has millions of views. So literally, the gospel has been presented by Charlie Kirk millions of times because of his death. So for me, it's given me a boldness to realize that I can do the same thing in my life. I don't have to compartmentalize my faith in Jesus Christ when I'm talking about something else. It's okay to also share my faith while I'm doing other things, even while I'm on this podcast. And that itself has power. And so we're seeing that. Hopefully I don't have to get assassinated for the truth of the gospel to get out there from me. But before you go, JD, I just wanted to tag on to that. Like Anton, you and I are directly in the film industry. You work more, I think, in groups that might tend to agree with Charlie more. I almost never do. And that was a real kind of like let it hit home moment of that, right? Where this guy knew he was wearing a bulletproof vest, wasn't he? Like he knew that he wasn't, but he knew he was putting himself in harm's way, right, for this. And I started to think, like, how many times have I censored myself for the approval of people I don't respect at all? And what is the point of that? So it made me really self-reflect about that. I don't know, JD, in your world, if that was part of the thing that drove home for you.
He might have been, by the way. I was thinking, I was like, was he? And so that was not a no, but it was a thinking through. Charlie's legacy for me is a commission for men to be men. Like, I think there's been such a big divide with the hunt for truth. What is a man? What is a woman? What is all this stuff? And I think, what is the truth of masculinity? Like, it really, really hit me hard seeing the video from Fox of his daughter running up to him. That with the video just kind of like circulated over and over and over again, because like that is the truth of being a great father. Like, your kids want to come to you, your kids love you, your wife loves you, and you love them. And I think for me, the biggest thing was just like wanting to be a better husband, wanting to be a better dad, wanting to be a better friend. The most important thing for me, I think, was just kind of like trying to take the tenets that we've been talking about of like, I think as I've watched more and more of Charlie's debates, the most poignant thing that I think he said repeatedly is just like, hey, I'm not blaming you, but I'm blaming the system that is indoctrinating you. Like, I'm not blaming you. Like, it's not your fault. When he says specifically, he's like, it's not your fault, but the system is failing you. It's not your fault, but the system is failing. It's not your fault that the college is failing you. And he was talking to an economics student. He's like, hey, do they teach Thomas Sowell here? And like, no. Mises. And he kind of goes through all these different economists. And the guy's like, no. He's like, so you're not getting an education, you're getting an indoctrination. And it's like, it's not your fault, but you're being lied to. It's not your fault, but they are not giving you what they say they're giving you. And I think for me, the legacy is trying to live into the truth. And even more specifically, Charlie's legacy is a commission for all people to try to live into the truth of the life that God has placed before you and the race that you are to run. Because I think that, for me, I have over my shoulder here, like the sign that's red that you can't see, but it says, well done, good and faithful servant. And that just hit me like a ton of bricks when I walked into the auditorium on Sunday. You know, because as Erica said, and everybody else said, Charlie ran the race he was given, and he ran it to the best of his ability, to the fullest. And that, I think, is the only thing we can all try to do, is try to be more like Charlie and run the race that God has placed before us. And we're all at different places. Like, I feel like I've done a terrible job of trying to run the race that I've been given so far, but that doesn't mean I can't start today. That doesn't mean I can't start tomorrow. It doesn't mean, well, don't start tomorrow, start today. That doesn't mean I can't start today to try to run that race to the fullest extent that I'm capable now. And so I think that's been the biggest thing for me, is like this challenge, this charge to step into that and just to stop being afraid.
I think for me, one of the big takeaways is just I think Corey, you posted this in the chat, but the visceral, clear mapping to the martyrdom of Stephen in Acts 8 and 9. Like, you read that account and you can just substitute out the pieces. And the pieces are, Stephen argues from the Holy Spirit, which, like, Charlie's on video literally saying, the only reason you guys like think that I'm nice is because this Holy Spirit is talking through me. So St. Stephen is arguing for Christianity, and he's speaking so powerfully that his enemies cannot refute him. And so they just get more and more angry, and they manipulate the leaders, they manipulate the teachers, they manipulate the politicians to do whatever is necessary to get him killed, which is how Stephen dies. He basically speaks the gospel, and that leads to his death. And the parallels to Charlie are just outrageous, right? This is exactly what he was doing. And it's not to say that Charlie's a saint or should be, you know, beautified and the rest of that stuff, but it's to say, it's just the mapping is visceral.
Yeah.
When you just read the account in Acts, you're like, wow, that's crazy. And then you read the next chapter. But this is like, no, that's a real person who really got stoned in the marketplace. Charlie is a real person who really got assassinated in the marketplace. This is the cost of Christianity, right? Like, and then what are we doing? Well, we're trying to dodge and hedge and weasel our way out of, you know, well, I don't want to speak the gospel today or whatever. And it's just like, whoa, guys.
Yeah. I wish I could take full credit for it, but it came from a pastor who called me, and he had preached that this is a martyrdom situation. And I initially had this reaction, I'm a little bit ashamed to say, I just like, it doesn't feel like that, right? It doesn't feel like the stoning of St. Stephen or like the Christians in Nigeria who are being killed every day, right? There's been like 7,000 of them this year, right? And there's a radical religious opposition to them, and people walk into their churches and shoot everybody and burn down the churches, right? That to me is such a clear, obvious martyrdom, and that's the way we generally conceive of it. But the point that he was making, and why he sent me that Stephen passage, was because he was saying the people that were opposed to Stephen didn't care that he was getting together with a community to worship God. They cared that he was saying that people had value beyond what Caesar said had value, or beyond what the Jewish authority at the time said they had value, which gave them freedom from those authorities. He was elevating life, right? He was saying there's a greater authority out there, which was a counter political point that he was making. He was saying the truth of my heart, and the truth that as I understand it, is that your politics are wrong. He was actually a political actor. And I think the reason that I initially didn't like that explanation, and I had to be convinced of it, and I am now, is that we have this idea that there is a secular world that we can step into as secular actors, and then we step out of it into our Christian lives. And that hasn't been true for more than, I mean, you could go back to the Enlightenment and the Renaissance, where we kind of had this idea, this kind of multicultural, like there's the secular world and the spiritual world, and they're different. And I think partly because of fiat, we've been allowed to live in this faux peace, this false peace about this secular world being just a marketplace of ideas, and then you can go do whatever religious activity you want apart from that. And I think that veil is just breaking for me, right? I think that veil is just tearing a bit, that everyone is bringing their spirituality into the secular world, and it leads to these wild misses in terms of what we think basic agreeable truths are. And I think the Christian worldview allows for you to have a conversation with someone who disagrees with you, and requires you to love the person who disagrees with you and the person who hates you. And that's our real power. That's our real strength, not appeasement, right? Not telling them they're right or pretending that we don't disagree with them, but loving them in the disagreement. And he really embodied that, and it was convicting for me. I don't know if anyone did anyone else have that sort of reaction to it. I don't know. I don't think we want to go too far down the martyrdom hole, but I think, I don't know. Anton, do you think I'm off base on that?
No, and I'm really happy to hear that you had a pastor say that, because I mean, I don't want to call my own church out. I go to a church in Hollywood that's not, it's not extremely progressive, but it feels like it's always battling that. It's kind of over time assimilated to the leftist, Democrat, progressive culture of Los Angeles. And I wasn't there the weekend after he was assassinated, but I asked around, and they said they sort of mentioned that something like that happened, but they never said his name. And then I was there the next Sunday, and they definitely never said his name. And it's just so interesting to me that this incredibly huge cultural movement, where somebody who, it's very clear now, was an evangelist for the gospel, was politically assassinated. And some churches were just like, not going to mention it. So it makes me happy to hear that was your experience. I kind of do want to steer things a little bit away from the martyrdom aspect to talk about a little bit of what he believed. Are you guys cool with that? Because I looked up on Grok.
We're just not theology experts. I didn't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, because I just feel like it's out of character for us. But I would love that, Anton.
Yeah. All right. So
as long as we don't rake his grave, right? But
yeah. Okay. No. These are all positive things. Yeah. So Charlie Kirk was pro Bitcoin. I had mentioned this early in the show, that he would sometimes use the word crypto, and I would never speak ill of the dead. If anybody uses the word crypto who's alive, I kind of am like, I write them off immediately. I'm like, you're a scammer. I want to be a toxic Bitcoin maximalist. There's just no place for that. It's not the word we need to be using right now. So forgiving Charlie of ever using the word crypto, he did talk about Bitcoin a lot. And I would encourage anybody to do this. All I typed into Grok was, what did Charlie Kirk say about Bitcoin? What are his direct quotes? And there were a couple of interesting ones. I'm not going to read them all, but I'll just read one great one real quick. He said, Bitcoin is a decentralized way that everyday patriots can build wealth, store wealth, transfer wealth without big daddy government monitoring, infiltrating, observing, or preventing your God-given right to your own private property. And then Media Matters, this is funny, Media Matters posted this clip, and they posted it with the headline, Charlie Kirk, cryptocurrency and Christians are two threats to the new world order.
Well, here's the thing. I think they're right, as they understand the new world order, right? I don't think cryptocurrency is. I think that cryptocurrency generally is a great way for a handful of people to take money from stupid people. But I think in a way that that's right, and it's similar to what we were saying about Saint Stephen, but he's basically arguing for the fact that there is a way to elevate people by treating them fairly, and it's really telling which kind of major institutions found that threatening. You know, that if you can boil it down to what he's saying economically and about Bitcoin, then what you're arguing for is that people should get to retain the value of the work that they do. It's really interesting who disagrees with that, who finds that really offensive or threatening or even violent, right? Because there is a violence to the financial system. There's a violence to the level of corporate and political capture of the financial system that keeps people in systems of oppression. That opinion does do violence to to the other opinion, right? They are in stark contrast with one another. But it's interesting that they told on themselves that quickly.
I think it's
You guys want to
interesting.
hear any more quotes of his?
I would listen to a bunch, and actually the thing that I would say, because actually I watched his last interview was like an hour before he was assassinated, and it was with a guy who has a bunch of restaurant chains in Arizona, and I'll try and see if I can find it. I bookmarked it, but it was super interesting to me. Yeah, here it is. And Elon reposted it. The second, so it was by Andrew K. Smith, and highly recommended if you're an entrepreneur to watch. I didn't know Charlie was an entrepreneur. Like, I think that was the biggest kind of learning for me. It's like, oh, he's this pundit. No, Charlie grew a company from a garage at like 718 and a half. It's like a garage in the middle of nowhere, Illinois, to $100 million a year. Like, growing anything past $1 million is hard. Growing something to 100 million with 1,000+ employees, like, that is an insane amount of effort, but then also just like focus and like capability. He was such a very, very thoughtful and strategic thinker when it came to business outside of just politics. And in this talk, he's asked by this guy, hey, I hear you're he says, I hear you're an investor. And he's like, I hear you do alternatives in crypto and everything else. And then Charlie basically was like, he's like, yeah, I do, some of the crypto stuff, but I'm not going to show you a coin, is what he said. And where I'm going with all of this is, I think, to Corey's point, like, it was fascinating to see how the pursuit of truth for Charlie was the goal, period, because he always believed he could be wrong. All of these interviews that are kind of coming out now, like his last talk, and even in this, he was just like, this is how I believe it now. What am I missing? He would always say, what am I missing? What am I missing? What am I, here's how I believe it. Here's how I understand it. What am I missing? Same thing with Dave Rubin. He's like, hey, here's what I believe. Here's what I understand. What am I missing? And so I think the conciliatory nature of always extending the olive branch to learn something new is something I really hope to do more of myself, because I don't think that's my MO. That's not my normal thing. Is I'm like, no, I'm right for this reason. And it's like, oh, but what am I missing? And so I hope I can ask that question more post this.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think to piggyback off of that, it's I think it's also a very post-Enlightenment, very Protestant, non-denominational sort of understanding, kind of Baptist understanding of God and the Bible, that with you and the Holy Spirit and the Bible, you have the entirety of truth that has ever existed or ever will exist. And I just don't believe that's the way the Lord has established the kingdom of God. He's established a community. There's nothing that you can understand better alone than that wouldn't be helped by understanding it in community, even if you're in a community that entirely disagrees with you, or if you're even maybe more dangerous if you're in a community that entirely agrees with you. And I think we have this conception of the kingdom of God that it's smaller than us, and that once you've figured out some truth, that you've figured out the truth of the gospel, and there's a paradox where you've understood enough to be saved, right? That like a child can understand enough, like, and as you understand that, if you believe it, you're in, right? It's the door is wide open. But then once you're through the door, there's this enormous city that you haven't explored, right? And the most mature, like Tim Keller, didn't know the whole thing. He didn't have a perfect understanding of the truth of the kingdom of God. And so we need community. We need each other. And everyone I've ever met has a reflection of God in them that I haven't seen before. Before I met them, I didn't know what that was. And it's a unique fingerprint that's different. And it's a different way of understanding God than I've understood before. It's a more broad, it's a more complete way of understanding God. And I think that level of humility is so vanishingly rare among Christian leaders today, because it's not a soundbite culture of Christianity at all. It's a humility of, I've come to understand this about the kingdom of God. This is my perspective, and I think it's really helpful for people. Now I need everyone else, right? I need everybody else to help inform that opinion and to understand it more fully. And that should be a joyful thing. That should be something that we seek and long for. And I think seeing someone in the public sphere actually acting that out, living that out, was really rare. It's a real contrast from most of the messaging that we get from Christianity. I also think it's one of the reasons that people think most of the Christian voices that are loud are didactic and condescending and exclusionary. And I think that's such a terrible crime, because we have this ability to say, I understand the truth fully enough for me, and I need you. That should be how we build community. It should be how we build community across borders. I don't know if it sparked that for anybody else, but I really did dwell on that after his passing.
Charlie was welcoming people to a movement. So many people who are the type of people that are in media or are on stage, they're kind of narcissistic. They love hearing their own voice. They just, I mentioned that he was friends with Candace Owens. I used to know Candace as well. Anyway, she can be somebody who, even if she's wrong on something, it's like she's running downhill. She has the momentum and she just can't stop herself. She's like double down, triple down, quadruple down. Charlie wasn't like that. He wanted to give a microphone to people to let them share their thoughts and opinions, and maybe there was something to learn. And if he got to a point where he was confident that he had something that he could teach them, then he would take the conversation back over. But he was very, very charitable. And what you were describing, Corey, is his humility. And that is so rare. It's so rare of a quality to have somebody who speaks so confidently and speaks with so many words, who is also humble. And, that's what we're realizing now, why we're still talking about him so many days after his assassination and still revealing all these things about his character, because they're just becoming more and more apparent. And it's becoming more apparent what a huge loss it was. Hopefully, and I pray that many more people will study him and will mirror some of his positive traits. And we're going to get 1,000 more Charlie Kirks as a result of his death.
Yeah. I think one of the videos that's come to mind as you say that, which this video is just coming out in the last couple of days. It's from a year or so ago, but he's out in the video. He's outlining why the right has a defensive posture and why that's the wrong posture, and that it needs to be an offensive posture. Like, how do we as the right go on the offensive? And listening to this, like, whoa, he like 100% got that right. I mean, as I say all the time, and as you guys have parroted it ever so often, the move is to attack. And one of the things that you quickly realize when you bring an argument, when you bring a debate to somebody, when you lodge a question that challenges someone's worldview, is when you go on the offensive, you immediately see defensive posturing. And the only way to get down or to get through defensive posturing is this humility that you're talking about, Anton. And I suspect that he figured that out pretty early on and just completely worked on flexing that muscle of, oh yeah, what did I get wrong here? Or how can I steelman your argument? How can I say it better than you are? Right. And because that's literally, like, when you're going on the offensive, the objective is to change minds, and you're never going to be able to change minds if you're just banging your head against the wall. No. The objective is to take the wall down. How do you do that? Humility, like, is literally disarming your opponent. But I forget what.
Yeah, I was just going to add. I think
Go for
when
it.
you say attack, like you mean the way Jesus did, right? You mean a Christian attack, right? There's no
literally enter the
attack,
world, like
right?
go,
There's no
like
like
you're in your
back
little
the Holy
thing.
Land by force. It's like the
Yeah.
attack is one of humility and self-sacrifice and love, and it can be offensive to someone who's not used to that, who's not ready for that, and you have to stand on the side of your own blood. You have to be able to take a punch in order to execute an effective Christian attack. But I would say Charlie did attack, and never violently. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. The turn the other cheek, right? I think there's so many things that as a Christian, when you reread the Bible the second time and the third time and the fourth time and the fifth time, you get a greater understanding of all this nuance. But the turn the other cheek is such a epitome, or it epitomizes the humility we are called to show. Because at the end of the day, it's like if you have somebody who slaps you and then they do it again, you're like, hey, sorry, you turn the other cheek. That is completely disarming. Because if they were in the wrong and then you're kind of giving them a chance to kind of prove it again, it's like they're going to hang themselves with their own rope. And the disarming nature of that act is so, it is what Charlie embodied. He was like, hey, he's like, here's the mic. And I think, sorry, world. I will say one thing about this turning the other cheek thing that's interesting. Go back and watch Charlie's debates, because one of the things that I noticed, because I was like, all right, I'm really into this, trying to like watch what's kind of going up right now, or rather like the actions that he took. And if you'll notice, he would pick up the mic and speak, but then the next thing he would always do is while the other person was speaking, he would put it down. He had these visual signals of kind of like giving them the chance and the opportunity. And I think that's one thing that we've kind of lost with this internet culture that we have, is like the WebEx and the Zoom. But like if you really look at the communicative signals Charlie would give to kind of like lay down his he's like laid bare. He's like, hey, I really want to hear you. I'm going to put my mic down so you understand I'm not going to shout over you. So you understand I'm not going to come at you. So you understand, and then he had, the white supremacists forever come on and people like, oh, whatever. It's like, Charlie would like very eloquently deconstruct those arguments of the racists and the white supremacists and all these people and kind of just like let them hang themselves. And so it was really interesting to kind of see how he would do that and not just why he was doing it.
So Anton, you hinted about this, but I mean, this podcast is a Bitcoin podcast. The whole purpose, like we're trying to like, hey, Bitcoin makes the world better. Now, Charlie Kirk operated in a world that is now different because of his assassination. I'm curious, where does Bitcoin come in to this equation that can now come in? Because I have an answer here, but I'm not going to give it right away. I want to hear what you guys say. The world has changed since his assassination. The Overton window has shifted. What did Charlie Kirk? I mean, you got a whole bunch of stuff right. The world has now changed, so like that pattern no longer applies to the world we live in now. What do you guys see that has changed? Where has the Overton window shifted?
I wasn't prepared for this question, but absolutely. We're living in a different world. We're living in a post Charlie Kirk assassination world. And in the same way that we're saying that he was a Christian martyr, think about other people who pretty much we can all agree were martyrs. Martin Luther King Jr. is one of those people. The left, the progressive type people who think that Charlie Kirk was a racist and a misogynist and a white supremacist or whatever things that they attach to him when they've never heard anything that he had to say, those people, when people who have critical reasoning and people who are of some level of intelligence start attaching things to Charlie Kirk the same way that people attach things to Martin Luther King, it is going to shock them. We're seeing this. I mean, all the people who got fired for the horrible things that they said on social media about Charlie Kirk were ignorant and they were unprepared for the new world that we're living in. So my argument is just that it is a monumental change and things are going to be different now. So I'm curious what you guys think the things are that are going to be different as a result of this.
Yeah, I think for me it was the rhetoric around the extreme nature of the language on both sides, but I think more acutely on the left because of the election of Trump, and I think if it had been Kamala, it would have been more acutely on the right. But the comparisons to fascism and the comparisons to full-on communism and those sorts of things are really extreme. I'm personally not a huge fan of Trump, but calling him Hitler is the most asinine, ahistorical nonsense I can imagine. And same with Kamala. I think she had very aggressive socialistic tendencies. Calling her Stalin is absolutely ridiculous and an affront to the 20 million people that Stalin starved with actual communism. And that sort of ratcheted up rhetoric is, I think when you are terminally online and the consequences of your words and actions are so far removed from you, I think it's easy to forget that your words and actions do have consequences. And I think in the wake of Charlie Kirk, there were a lot of those terminally online people saying, finally, one down, who's next? And realizing you don't have, 99% of your world is behind you, but 99% of the real world thinks you're absolutely insane and wants you to be fired and will never hire you. They don't want to talk to you. You have completely removed yourself from society with these fringe views. And I think that Overton window, I think I alluded to it at the beginning, but I think that silent majority in the middle is getting a little bit more loud and being like, all right, enough of this nonsense. Stop this, right? Stop lawfare on both sides. Stop this insane rhetoric on both sides. It's ridiculous. And just because one person is in power doesn't give you the right to pretend you're a revolutionary fighting against 1939 Hitler. It's just ridiculous. And it was never true. It was never even close to being true on either side. That whole revolutionary streak, you look at the actual bravery of the Revolutionary War was throwing off a tyrant, like a literal king who was taxing the country for 2%, by the way, on all goods. That was the entire tax. And that was taxation without representation. That's oppression. We're fighting against oppression. That's right. That just makes sense. It makes logical sense. Trump's executive orders are not even a shade of that. They're not even close to that. And I think that sort of screeching rhetoric is starting to land on deaf ears more and more.
I'll say this.
Go ahead.
No, this is my kind of last note because I got to jump here in a second. But I totally agree with what you're saying, Corey. And I have some clients, and they're all over the world. We had a call earlier this week, and clients are in Argentina, Italy, France, all over the world, and then Canada. And every single person, I was like, hey, has the Charlie Kirk kind of news got to your country? And if so, what's the response? And every single one of them was like, it's here, and everybody's fed up. Everybody is tired with the rhetoric, tired with the politics, tired with the constant shaming and browbeating coming from the political divide. And it's like, people have had enough. And so that Overton window, I think, is shifting to be like, hey, civil discourse is correct, not this abomination that has been created by a media that just needs clicks, this hyperinflated constant screeching. All around the world, everybody is now at a fever pitch where they're like, enough is enough. We need to stop all of this violence and come to the table and have real conversations again and not just screech about hyperbolic baloney everywhere. And I think that's been probably the biggest shift, is not just an American shift, but a global shift back towards sanity.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I just kind of a quick addendum to that. I think specifically in our case, because the right's in control now and the Democratic Party is trying to figure out how to get control back, I think they're realizing too how much of that is so unwinning. It's not winsome, right? That even among their own side, they're realizing the majority of these issues that we care about, the majority of the country doesn't care about, even among our own party. They just don't care about these things that we're shrieking about. And I think that's been driven home way more and more, right? Especially as they lose young people for the first time in 20 years. They're massively losing young people I think those sorts of things, whether you want to call it an attack of morality and conscience or not, I think there's a lot of that going on. But even if you ever just want to win again, you gotta self-examine and be self-aware about these tactics that you're taking.
Yeah, one of the things that comes to mind in terms of like an Overton window shift is that, and you can see it in visual or real time, people on the left going like, "Oh, who is this racist Charlie Kirk?" And then they go look up. Well, again, I'm gonna prove that he was racist. Here we go. And they look up all the videos and they're like, "There's not a racist bone in his body. I was lied to."
Yeah.
What else have I been lied to? And I feel like that is, for me, like that's the shift. You could describe it, the whole thing in that. What else have I been lied to? Wait, like everything's opened up for debate now. Like you guys are saying, is this true? Is that not true? That like Zach talks about it a lot. We're entering the age of discernment. If you don't have discernment, you're not going to be able to survive the age.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Well, if anything opened up that age, that the assassination was it. Now, as a Bitcoiner, this is a huge opportunity for me, which is to say, and I've already seen it. I've already had conversations about this with people before. It was like, oh yeah, you're trying to shill the whatever. Yeah, I heard about that. Okay, like just write it off. It's not a real thing. But now, like even had a conversation with the guy last night. It was like, no, this is like the Charlie Kirk assassination was pointing to something, and Bitcoiners have been pointing to that same thing as well. And now there's kind of like this, both sides can see that the other side is pointing to the same thing. The wall between, oh, you guys are just trying to shill us your coin and dump on us or whatever, that's gone now. Now people are like, wait a second, what's the actual thing they're trying to get across? Like, I want to listen to their argument. I want to listen to what's true here, what's try and figure out what's false or whatever it is, right? Consequently, and I'm already seeing it, Bitcoin is making new roads forward through the culture. And oh gosh, what are the ultimate values of Bitcoin? Hard money, low time preferences, all these things that we've railed on this pod for months. All of that is now there's an opening up on the right that says, wait a second, maybe we do need to evaluate this. Maybe this is the real thing. One of the, again, not to rake the grave, but Turning Point USA was founded, and there's a quote about it, but Charlie said, like, I'm founding this to bring the debate to colleges and actually go into the lion's den and actually face, like, this is where all of the absurd and insane ideology comes from, at the colleges. So let's go to the colleges and debate those. Now, there's also videos of Charlie at the colleges saying verbatim something along the lines of, I have no hope that the collegiate system in America will ever get better or ever get fixed. Right? But as Bitcoiners, we already have hope that it could get better, because we know that Bitcoin, like the ultimate cause of the ultimate problem that is destroying our colleges, is their proximity to the money printer. And Bitcoin,
can I jump in though? Yeah, can I jump in though? Because in a way, I have hope for education, right? Mm-hmm. Not in a way. I'll just say I have hope for education, because education is necessary, and as long as parents have children, they're going to want their kids to be educated. I don't have a lot of hope for the current university system as it's constructed, because they have ossified around the money printer. Like, the only reason they can exist in their current form with these beautiful buildings and these ridiculous 10-year commitments and financial aid structures and all of these things, tuition prices are absolutely insane. The only reason all of those things can exist is because of the money printer, because we make up assets that don't exist and then swap them with people. And then we pretend that was real. And so in a way, I agree with Charlie Kirk that I don't have a lot of hope for the university system, but I have a lot of hope for a Bitcoin-backed education system, which should be significantly better. And in the same way that you can only interact with the Bitcoin network if you're honest with it, that's what should filter out into everything it touches. A Bitcoin-backed education system you should only be able to interact with the value of education if you are engaging with truth. And I think that's what the upside of what Bitcoin can offer it.
Yeah. And like, I mean, to really just bring, like, maybe not bring it home, but like the like fiat currency allows it and incentivizes high time preference culture and behavior. What is high time preference culture and behavior? It's don't discern, don't do the research, just take whatever brainwashing material you're being fed, just consume it and don't question it. Like that's what, and I could spend the whole time going through the actual process of how that happens, but like that's the whole thing. And that's what causes all the brainwashing. That's what, like, hey, one of the planks on the Communist Manifesto is to have a central bank that can print money and control the credit. Well, if you need to ideologically control a population, you got to have to pay for that. And well, just anybody who goes to an economics school, as Charlie Kirk pointed out, you're not actually learning economics. You're just learning propaganda. You're getting brainwashed into believing that the money printer is the actual source of value and all the rest of that. But now going forward, we have Bitcoin, and like Charlie took the fight to like the downstream battlefield. Bitcoiners can take the fight further upstream to the actual central bank. And yeah, Corey, maybe our higher education like institutions, they completely collapse under the ability to no longer fund themselves with regards to a fiat money printer. This is nowhere near, probably not in our lifetime, right? But like as we move to a Bitcoin standard, those systems will be forced to change.
Yes.
And that gives me a ton of hope, right?
Me too.
And
yeah.
And
it's a forced purification around reality, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if Anton, do you have any more thoughts on this?
Just that Bitcoin makes things better in general. There will always be exceptions and specific cases of people who just don't want to be better. So in general, as the world moves towards the Bitcoin standard, it is going to raise the standards for everybody and everything. Does it take away all suffering and all disease, all scammery, all sin? No. Those things still exist, but in general, it just makes everything better. So an analogy was popping into my head. It's like a filmmaking analogy. And I realize we're an hour and 17 minutes into this podcast, so I don't want to go too deep with this. But I was thinking about AI, how some people, when AI became a thing for video creation, they're like, I am going to just make videos purely made out of AI to try to fool people. And they make this garbage AI slop that just looks horrible. Then you have another group of people that say, how can I take the filmmaking that I want to do and elevate it somehow? How do I use these tools to make it better? It takes the exact same amount of hard work that it would have taken if AI hadn't existed. But now you have an added higher level tools that allow you to make the product that you're making better, but you still have to work just as hard to make that product. You can just make the product better. And that is what Bitcoin does. That's what Bitcoin will do for education. People can still make slop education. People can still have these liberal arts schools that teach things that are nonsense, so they can try to brainwash people with socialism. But when people are empowered and they're not a slave to this fiat mind virus that makes people high time preference, then people have the ability to pursue things that are truly valuable. So yeah, hopefully that analogy makes sense. And yeah, that's it. That's
I like it. That's a good hammer point. I don't know that we needed to overly belabor that. That's why we do the podcast.
Indeed. All right, guys, unless there's any final thoughts, we could call it here.
I'm good.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you for joining, everybody. Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk, 1993 to 2025. Peace. Thanks for tuning in to Better by Bitcoin. Bitcoin makes everything better. Like, subscribe, and follow us on X at BetterBYBTC, YouTube at BetterBYBitcoin. Not financial advice, mathematical certainty.